Good evening, all, and welcome back to Dark Fears. Tonight, we journey deep into the frozen heart and forgotten corners of Oregon, through isolated small towns, endless winter wilderness, and places where help does not reach, to uncover 7 of the most disturbing and terrifying winter horror stories ever recorded. These are not legends or campfire tales. These are real, documented encounters from ordinary people who never expected to face true evil. From snow-buried highways to cabins swallowed by white silence. From forests where footsteps follow with no owner. Tonight, you will hear horrors that refuse to stay buried. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe to Dark Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls. Now, let us step into the shadows of Oregon, where civilization ends and terror begins. My name is Ethan Moore, and this happened during the winter of 2017 when I was working seasonal maintenance near the Cascade Mountains in Oregon. I took the job because I wanted isolation. After a divorce and a brother who'd stopped returning my calls, silence felt safer than people. The state assigned me a small cabin near an unused Forest Service road. No neighbors, no phone signal, just snow, trees, and a radio that crackled more than it spoke. My responsibility was simple: monitor snowfall levels and clear the access road if emergency vehicles ever needed passage. By late December, the snow came down heavy and wrong. It didn't fall gently. It slammed. Night after night, the wind howled like something angry it had been forgotten. On my 3rd week, I started hearing knocks, slow, deliberate taps. Coming from the cabin walls, not the door, the walls. Always 3 knocks, always after midnight. At first, I blamed ice. I shouldn't have. The knocks followed a pattern. 3 taps, a pause, then nothing. When I opened the door, the snow outside was untouched. No footprints, no drag marks, no broken crust. Just smooth white like a blank page. I radioed the main station. Static answered. I tried again, louder this time, but the only response was a faint hum, like breathing through fabric. That was the first moment fear crept in. Not sharp, but slow. Curious, the 4th night, the knocking came earlier. 11:17 p.m. I remember because I checked my watch, hoping it was still too early for whatever this was. This time the sound came from behind me, from the wall near my bed. I froze. The knocks weren't loud, but they were close. Intentional, as if whoever, or whatever, was outside knew exactly where I was lying. Then something new happened. After the 3rd knock, a sound followed. A soft scrape, like snow being pushed back. From the inside, I didn't sleep after that. I sat upright on the bed with my boots still on. The lantern turned low, my eyes locked on the wall like it might blink back. The scraping stopped, but the silence that followed felt deliberate, like something waiting to see what I would do next. By morning, I convinced myself exhaustion was messing with me. Winter isolation does things to your head. I told myself that while shoveling the porch, while checking the generator, while forcing myself to eat canned soup that tasted like metal. That afternoon, I noticed something that didn't fit. Along the side of the cabin, the snow was pushed outward, as if something had pressed against the wall from inside the snow bank. Not footprints, not animal tracks. Just a smooth, concave impression, shoulder height. I pressed my glove against it. The snow was warm. That night, I stacked furniture against the bedroom wall. It didn't help. At 12:03 a.m., the knocks returned. Closer, slower, and followed by something worse. A whisper that used my name. Ethan, it whispered, muffled, like a voice trapped under ice. Not loud, not threatening. Familiar. My mother used to say my name that way when I was sick as a kid. That memory hit me harder than fear. My hands shook so badly, I dropped the radio trying to call for help. When it hit the floor, the whisper stopped. Then came the pressure. The wall bowed inward by an inch, maybe two. Wood creaked, nails screamed. Snow sifted down from the ceiling beams as if gravity itself was being tested. I backed away until my shoulders hit the opposite wall, my breath fogging the air. "Let me in," the voice said, not pleading, certain. I realized then the knocks weren't asking. They were checking, measuring, learning where I slept, how I reacted, how long I froze before moving. When the wall finally relaxed, snapping back into place, the silence returned. But it wasn't empty anymore. Something had decided I was worth the effort. The next morning, I made the decision to leave. Not because I wanted to, but because staying felt like waiting to be chosen. I packed only what I could carry: radio, food, flashlight, and the old service pistol I wasn't technically supposed to have. The forest was too quiet as I stepped outside. No wind, no birds. Even my boots sounded wrong against the snow, like the ground was listening. The service road stretched ahead of me, half buried, winding between trees bent under the weight of winter. I hadn't gone far when I noticed something ahead. Dark shapes standing where the road curved. At first, I thought they were tree stumps. Then one of them leaned forward. They were not solid figures, more like hollows in the snowfall, shaped vaguely like people but wrong at the edges, as if the snow itself refused to touch them. When I stopped, they stopped. When I took a step back, every one of them knocked 3 times on the air in front of them. I turned and ran back toward the cabin, knowing I had already waited too long. I slammed the cabin door shut and locked it, my heart hammering so loud I was sure they could hear it. The knocks started immediately. Every wall, every side, perfectly synchronized. Not violent, patient. Then the radio came to life. Clear. Too clear. "Ethan," a calm voice said. Male this time. Professional. "We've been trying to reach you. Open the door." I recognized the voice. It belonged to Mark Jensen, the supervisor who'd assigned me this post. The problem was, Mark had died the year before in a logging accident. I'd attended the funeral. I remembered the closed casket. The voice continued, reassuring, reasonable, explaining delays, bad weather, rescue plans. It said everything I wanted to hear. But while it spoke, the knocks changed rhythm. Not 3 anymore. Continuous. Curious, almost excited. I finally understood the truth. The snow didn't want inside the cabin. It wanted me outside in it. I don't remember deciding to open the door. I remember standing in front of it, my hand on the latch, listening to the radio explain things that made sense only if I stopped thinking. My breath came slow, steady like I was being coached through it. The knocking faded as soon as my fingers touched the metal handle. That terrified me more than the noise ever had. Silence meant attention. When I pulled the door open, the night rushed in. Cold, so sharp it burned. The figures stood closer now, arranged in a half circle just beyond the porch light. They had no faces, only shallow impressions where features should be, like masks pressed from the inside of snowbanks. The radio voice spoke again, gentle. "Step forward, Ethan. You're freezing." I took one step. My boots sank deeper than they should have, like the ground was softening beneath me. The figures leaned in unison, and for the first time, I saw movement beneath their surfaces. Slow shifting shapes, as if something alive was wearing winter as skin. I realized then they weren't copies of people. They were spaces where people had gone. The pain hit my legs first. Not cold. Pressure. My boots disappeared into the snow as if the ground had turned to wet cement. Panic finally broke through whatever calm had been placed inside me. I tried to pull back, but my body resisted, heavy and slow, like I'd already been claimed. The figures reached out. Their arms didn't grab. They surrounded, folding snow and darkness around me. I smelled earth, pine, and something rotten beneath ice. Then a memory surfaced, sharp and unwanted. My brother's last voicemail. Me ignoring it, telling myself I'd call back when things were quieter. I screamed, not for help, but in refusal. I tore free with a strength I didn't know I had, ripping one boot loose and stumbling backward onto the porch. The porch board snapped under sudden weight, too much weight, behind me. The figures recoiled as the cabin light flared. They didn't vanish. They retreated, sinking back into the snow like breath leaving lungs. When the door slammed shut, the knocking never came again. But the snow outside still waits. I stayed barricaded inside the cabin until morning, gripping the pistol so hard my fingers went numb. The radio went dead again, as if nothing had ever spoken through it. When daylight finally bled through the frosted windows, the world looked normal. Too normal. Search and rescue found me that afternoon. They said they'd been trying to reach me for 3 days, but my signal never showed. One of them asked why I was barefoot in the snow. That's when I realized I was missing a boot. We went back outside together. There were no figures, no hollows, no disturbed snow, except for one perfectly preserved human-shaped depression beside the porch. The lead rescuer stared at it for a long time before covering it with his shovel. He didn't ask questions. He didn't want answers. Before we left, I glanced back at the cabin wall. Beneath the fresh snowfall, I could still see faint outward bulges. Multiple this time. Like the snow remembered pressing against it. Whatever those things were, they hadn't failed. They had simply learned patience. I quit the job the same day. I moved south. I stopped answering calls from unknown numbers. For a while, that felt like enough. But winters follow you. They creep into cracks, into memories, into the quiet moments when you think you're safe. Every December, I hear it again. 3 slow knocks. Not on walls anymore, but in my dreams. Last winter, I woke to find frost forming on the inside of my bedroom window, even though the heater was running. When I wiped it away, there was a shape beneath the ice, an impression of a hand pressed from the outside. My phone buzzed, a voicemail. No number attached. It was my own voice, calm and patient, saying, "Ethan, let me in. I don't live near snow now. I don't need to. Because I finally understand the truth. The things in the winter don't move with the storm. They move with you." My name is Caleb Rourke, and this happened to me in February of 2019, during the worst winter storm Eastern Oregon had seen in decades. I was a long-haul delivery driver, running night routes because they paid extra and because I liked empty roads. Less traffic, less noise, less people asking questions. That night, I was heading east on Highway 26, hauling medical supplies between small towns most maps barely bothered to name. Snow had already swallowed the shoulders of the road, and the sky was the color of dirty wool. My GPS lost signal just passed mile marker 62, but that wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the car parked ahead of me. Hazards flashing, engine running, driver's door wide open. No footprints leading away, no sign of anyone inside. I slowed down, radio crackling with static and half voices. Every instinct told me not to stop, but the storm was closing in fast, and you don't leave people to freeze. That belief almost killed me. I pulled over about 20 feet behind the car and killed my engine. The silence afterward was immediate and wrong, like the storm was holding its breath. Snow drifted sideways, stinging my face as I stepped out, boots crunching too loud in the stillness. "Hello?" I shouted. The wind stole the word before it traveled 10 feet. The car was warm inside. That hit me first. The heater was still running, dashboard lights glowing soft and orange. A half-full coffee sat in the cup holder, steam faint but real. Whoever had been driving hadn't left long ago. That's when I noticed the seatbelt. It was buckled, tight, as if someone were still sitting there, but there was no body. Just a shallow depression in the seat, slowly filling with blowing snow. My radio crackled behind me, not static this time. A voice came through, distorted but clear enough to understand. "Do not turn around," it said. I turned anyway, and the road behind my truck was gone, replaced by white, stretching endlessly in both directions. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd gone blind. The road hadn't vanished. It had been erased. No tire tracks, no guardrails. Just a flat, endless sheet of white swallowing my headlights. When I spun back toward the abandoned car, it was still there, idling patiently like it had nowhere else to be. My radio hissed again. "You stopped where you shouldn't have," the voice said. Not angry, informative. I recognized the tone. Dispatch. But the cadence was wrong, like someone repeating something they'd practiced without understanding it. Snow pressed harder against my jacket. But beneath the wind, I heard something else. Footsteps. Slow. Careful. Circling me just beyond visibility. I swung my flashlight around, catching nothing but swirling flakes. Then the beam passed over the snowbank beside the road, and I saw faces. Not fully formed, just impressions. Like expressions pushed into the snow from the inside. Eyes, mouths. Open, frozen mid-scream. The radio spoke again. "Do not approach them," it said. That's when one of the faces blinked. I stumbled backward and slammed into my truck, gasping hard enough to fog my visor. The faces in the snow didn't move anymore, but I could feel their attention, heavy and patient. The abandoned car's engine suddenly revved on its own, headlights flaring brighter. The radio clicked. "They froze before they understood," the voice said. "You still have time." "What are you?" I shouted, my voice breaking. There was a pause, long enough for the wind to howl through it. "We are what remains," it answered. The snow beneath my boots shifted, not drifting, parting. My foot sank ankle deep, then calf deep, as if the road had turned soft and hungry. I grabbed the truck door and hauled myself back up, heart pounding so hard it hurt. That's when I noticed something etched into the mile marker sign, half buried beside the road. Names. Dozens of them, scratched deep into the metal. At the bottom, freshly carved and still dark, was my own. The storm hadn't trapped me. It had recognized me. I ripped my gaze from the mile marker and dove into the cab, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the mirrors. My hands shook as I turned the key. The engine hesitated, one painful second where nothing happened, then roared to life like it had been holding its breath. The radio burst into overlapping voices, not shouting, reciting, names, dates, mile numbers, spoken flat and precise like roll call. I recognized a few town names, places I'd driven through, places that barely existed anymore. Outside, shapes began forming in the white. Not solid bodies, but outlines. People-sized gaps where snow refused to settle. They stood along the road in two neat lines, facing inward, creating a corridor straight ahead of my truck. The headlights flickered. For a split second, I saw them clearly. Faces hollowed by cold, eyes black and endless, mouths stretched as if mid-breath. the radio cut to a single voice again. "Drive slowly," it instructed. "Do not break the line." That's when I understood. The road hadn't disappeared. It had been replaced. I eased the truck forward, barely touching the accelerator. The corridor moved with me, the figures gliding silently along the edges of my vision. If I drifted even inches too far left or right, the nearest shape leaned inward, snow rippling like disturbed water. Sweat ran down my spine despite the cold. Every instinct screamed to floor it, to smash through whatever illusion this was. But I knew, deep in my gut, that speed would mean breaking the line. As I crept forward, memories surfaced that weren't mine. Flashes of headlights fading, engines stalling, hands pounding on frozen glass. I felt panic that didn't belong to me, despair layered over despair, all of it pressing down until my chest ached. The radio spoke softly now. "They tried to leave," it said. "They rushed." Ahead, the white began to thin. I saw asphalt bleeding through, dark and real. The corridor started to narrow, the figures drawing closer, their faces almost touching my windows. One leaned in and whispered, not with sound, but certainty, "Don't forget us." Then the road dropped away, and the storm broke. I didn't remember accelerating. But suddenly I was moving at full speed, the truck tearing through clean asphalt as if the last hour had never happened. The storm was gone behind me, replaced by a calm night sky dusted with stars. My hands were still locked to the wheel, white-knuckled and numb. I pulled over at the next rest turnout and vomited into the snow. The radio was silent now, dead. No voices, no static, just the hum of the engine cooling. When I checked the time, my stomach dropped. Nearly 4 hours had passed. I should have been 10 miles down the road, not 80. My logbook showed entries I didn't remember writing, timestamps, mileage, neat and precise, all of it accurate. Before leaving, I walked back along the shoulder. That's when I saw them, frozen beneath the surface of the snowbank. Not faces this time, hands. Dozens of them, reaching upward, fingers curled as if they'd tried to climb out. One glove matched the pair I wore. I didn't look any longer. I made it to my destination just before dawn, but I didn't unload the truck. I couldn't bring myself to open the back doors. I sat there, watching frost creep across the windshield, listening to the quiet. The dispatcher called at sunrise, a real voice this time. She asked why I'd logged a stop at mile marker 62. My mouth went dry. I hadn't written that down. I knew I hadn't. She hesitated, then said something that still wakes me up at night. "You're not the first driver to do that," she said. "Most of them don't make it past that point." Before hanging up, she added one more thing. "If you ever hear instructions on the radio during a storm, don't answer." I quit long-haul trucking that week. Last winter, I drove past a mile marker 62 in clear weather. There were fresh names carved into the metal. Mine was deeper than the rest, and it was still warm. I tried to forget mile marker 62 by replacing routes, seasons, even states. It didn't matter. Every winter, something found me. Radios in my car would switch on by themselves during storms, playing nothing but a low hiss that made my ears ring. GPS screens would briefly reroute me onto roads I knew didn't exist, then correct themselves like nothing happened. One night, parked safely in my driveway, I heard it again. The same calm, instructional tone, coming from my dashboard. "Maintain your lane," it said. I shut the car off. The voice kept going. That's when I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. The corridor wasn't a place, it was a process. A system that sorted who panicked, who rushed, and who obeyed. The names carved into the sign weren't memorials. They were records. proof of passage. I hadn't escaped mile marker 62. I'd been released. And releases, I learned, were temporary. Because systems like that don't forget the ones who follow instructions well. Last February, I received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of DOT letterhead and a laminated badge marked temporary. No explanation, no contact number. 2 days later, a storm warning flashed across my phone. Eastern Oregon, whiteout conditions, multiple stranded motorists. My radio turned on by itself. "We could use someone experienced," the voice said. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The route populated itself on my GPS, ending exactly where I knew it would. Mile marker 62. I'm writing this from a rest stop just west of it. The storm is rolling in fast, swallowing the road inch by inch. Ahead of me, hazard lights blink in the snow. A car waits with its door open. If you're listening to this story, understand one thing. When the radio gives you instructions in a storm, it's not trying to save you. It's trying to replace me. My name is Lena Harper, and this happened to me during the winter of 2020 when I joined a small group of friends for a research trip in Devil's Pass, Oregon. We wanted isolation, snow, and the thrill of documenting abandoned cabins in the mountains. The area was notorious locally for disappearances, but none of us believed the rumors, not fully. The cabin we found was hidden at the end of a narrow, snow-choked trail, partially collapsed yet strangely intact. No footprints led to it, no chimney smoke, just the hollow promise of warmth in a world of ice. We set up cameras and drones, excited to document every creaking beam and frost-covered floor. Laughter echoed briefly through the trees, but it felt hollow. By nightfall, the storm rolled in faster than expected. Blizzards in Oregon were nothing new, but this one had a strange rhythm, almost like it was counting. That's when I heard it. Not the wind, not a tree. A soft singing, barely human, coming from the cabin's upper loft. The singing stopped when I whispered to my friends, but the air felt thicker afterward, like breathing in melted ice. One of them, Aaron, shrugged it off, calling it the wind hitting the rafters. I wanted to believe him, but every instinct screamed otherwise. Inside, the cabin smelled of old wood, soot, and something acrid, almost metallic. Our flashlights flickered across the walls, revealing old graffiti scratched deep into the beams. Names, dates, strange symbols no one recognized. I set up my recorder, hoping to capture the singing. Minutes passed. Nothing. Then, a thump from the loft, just above our heads. Not wood settling. Footsteps. Deliberate. I froze. The others heard it too. Aaron tried to laugh, but it came out weak. "We should check it out," he said. No one moved. We all felt it. Something waiting at the top of the stairs, watching, patient. That's when I noticed the snow outside the broken window. Footprints leading up to the cabin, leading nowhere. We finally decided to investigate the loft. The stairs creaked under our weight, every step echoing unnaturally in the small cabin. My recorder caught faint, almost melodic whispers, as if the walls themselves were murmuring. At the top, the loft was empty, except for a single rocking chair, swaying slowly on its own, as though an invisible occupant had just left. I stepped closer, heart hammering, and noticed scratches along the floorboards, tiny, claw-like marks, fresh in the snow-dusted dust. The singing returned, louder this time and closer, but still unseen. It seemed to circle us, moving from corner to corner of the loft. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs refused. Aaron tried to touch the chair. It swung violently, as if pushed by hands made of wind. He stumbled back, knocking over a pile of old blankets. One of them fell, revealing a small trapdoor in the floor. I leaned over it, peering down, and immediately felt the air change. Cold, heavy, and smelling of iron. Something below was waiting. We debated opening the trapdoor, each of us silent except for our shallow breaths. The storm outside intensified, snow pelting the cabin walls like hundreds of small fists. I finally forced my hand onto the latch. The metal was icy, and the hinge groaned like a dying animal. We lifted it slowly. Beneath was a narrow, black staircase descending into a space that smelled rotting and wet, like frozen soil mixed with something metallic. Every instinct screamed at me to step back, but curiosity, or stupidity, won. Aaron volunteered to go first. He took 2 steps, then froze. His flashlight illuminated the walls, and I saw them, small, deep carvings of faces, dozens of them pressed and distorted into the wood. Some looked screaming, others mournful, but all were watching us. He backed up suddenly, swearing under his breath. From below, a low hum began, vibrating through the staircase. It was inhuman, almost a song, calling, beckoning us down into the dark. None of us wanted to follow, but none of us could leave either. I went down first, gripping my flashlight like a weapon. The steps felt alive beneath my feet, groaning and shifting as though the staircase itself was breathing. Every inch deeper, the air grew colder and wetter, carrying a metallic tang that made my stomach twist. Aaron and the others followed hesitantly, whispering my name like they expected me to vanish at any moment. At the bottom, the space opened into a narrow, low-ceilinged room, carved directly into the mountain. Snow had blown in through cracks, dusting the floor. But that wasn't the worst part. Across the room, hundreds of tiny footprints crisscrossed the floor, some fresh, some faded into ice. They weren't human. The shape was wrong. Shorter, wider, with too many toes, claw-like and uneven. From the corner, a low scratching began, like nails on wood. It moved rhythmically, almost musical, circling the room without a source. I realized with a sick feeling that the trapdoor above wasn't the only entrance. Something had been watching us before we even arrived. The scratching grew louder, joined now by a soft whispering, almost like a chorus. I could barely make out words, but one phrase repeated. Leave, stay, follow. Aaron stumbled backward and yelled. A shadow flickered at the edge of the flashlight beam, a figure, small, hunched, moving unnaturally fast. I froze, realizing it wasn't human. Its skin, or whatever covered it, glimmered faintly like wet stone, and its eyes reflected the light in sharp, white slits. The others panicked. My flashlight swung wildly, catching more figures emerging from the corners, each smaller than a man, but impossibly fast, surrounding us. One of them leapt toward Aaron. He fell backward into a stack of old crates, and the figure disappeared into the shadows before I could react. I shouted, tried to grab him, but the room seemed larger than it should be, stretching into darkness, swallowing sound, swallowing us. I realized then the cabin wasn't just abandoned. It was alive. I grabbed Aaron's arm and dragged him toward the trapdoor, but it no longer led straight up. The steps twisted unnaturally, elongating as though the cabin itself was shifting, bending the laws of space to trap us. The whispering grew into a crescendo, voices overlapping, singing, chanting, urging, mocking. Something brushed past my shoulder. I turned just in time to see one of the small figures vanish into the floorboards. Its face was pale and featureless, yet I felt its gaze burrow into my mind. We stumbled blindly, following the distorted staircase, and came upon a second room we hadn't noticed before. The walls were covered in frozen handprints, smeared and clawed into the wood, as though something had tried to climb out or in. I realized with horror that the first carvings in the loft weren't graffiti. They were records, warnings, each one a person who hadn't made it out. And now we were next. We reached a small landing, and the air shifted. Warmer, heavier, smelling faintly of decay and wood smoke. The largest figure appeared at the far end, hunched but towering over the small ones, its limbs elongated, its movements jerky and unnatural. It tilted its head, listening as if weighing us. The chorus of whispers fell silent immediately, replaced by a low growl vibrating through the floor. My chest tightened. Fear became physical, a force pressing down on me. Aaron whispered, trembling, It wants us to go upstairs." I nodded, unsure if it was hope or instinct. Every instinct screamed that leaving would trigger something worse. As we ascended, the staircase shifted again, opening into the loft. The rocking chair had stopped. The trapdoor was empty. But in the snow-dusted loft floor, new scratches appeared, fresh, deep, clawed marks leading straight to the window. And the singing started again. Closer, patient, waiting for us to leave the cabin, or for the cabin to take us. We froze in the loft, listening to the singing swirl around us like a living thing. It wasn't coming from any one direction. It was the cabin. The floorboards groaned under invisible weight, and the shadows seemed to breathe independently of the moonlight. Aaron tried to break a window, but the glass resisted, bending instead of shattering. I realized then the walls weren't just wood. They were skin, stretched over something vast and patient. The small figures began circling us again, faster now, their tiny feet leaving prints that vanished before my eyes. The low growl returned, echoing in every corner, vibrating through my teeth. We backed against the loft railing, trapped. My flashlight flickered, illuminating one small face pressed to the floorboards, featureless, pale, yet horrifyingly aware. Then, the trapdoor slammed shut from below. The cabin exhaled. The singing stopped. Silence swallowed everything. For a heartbeat, I felt safe. Then I realized the cabin hadn't let us go. It was deciding what to keep. By the time dawn crept through the frost-covered windows, the storm outside had cleared. The cabin seemed calm, almost inviting. But my friends and I knew better. We fled down the twisted trail, snow crunching beneath boots, hearts hammering in unison. When we reached the main road, we turned back once. The cabin was gone, not collapsed, not hidden, just vanished, leaving only disturbed snow and frozen footprints that led nowhere. We never spoke of it again. No one believed the small details we tried to share. Our footage and recordings showed nothing unusual, just static, shadows, and faint wind. But I still remember the feeling, the sensation of being weighed and measured by a place alive and hungry, patient and intelligent. Every winter, I avoid Devil's Pass. But the memory lingers. The cabin isn't just a place. It waits. It listens. And it never forgets. Somewhere in the snow, it still sings. My name is Jordan Myers, and this happened during the winter of 2018, when I joined a small team of photographers exploring the abandoned forests of Hollow Pines, Oregon. The locals whispered about a lake that never fully froze, even in the harshest winters. A black mirror in the middle of white wilderness, rumored to swallow anyone foolish enough to get close. We arrived late afternoon, the sky bruised with clouds and low light, and snow fell like ash. The forest was quiet in a way that made you hyper-aware of every footstep. Hollow Pines lived up to its name. Trees were skeletal, branches twisting unnaturally, groaning in the wind. The lake was visible through the pines, a flat, black expanse, perfectly smooth, reflecting the stormy sky. As we approached, I noticed something strange on the ice. Faint depressions, circular and deep, as if someone had pressed their hands and knees into it recently. I shrugged it off at first. Maybe hunters or pranksters. But the air around the lake felt wrongly heavy, like gravity itself had thickened. We set up our cameras on the shore, tripod legs sinking slightly into fresh snow. My friend Maya pointed out strange ice patterns near the depressions, swirling circular grooves that seemed almost intentional, like markings of some ritual. Maybe animals? I suggested, though my voice trembled. None of us believed it. And yet the stillness around the lake pressed down on us, heavy and suffocating. We started taking photographs. Every flash of light reflected strangely in the lake, not like water, but like liquid obsidian, blacker than any reflection should be. Shadows moved in the corners of my eyes, quick, subtle, and always gone when I turned my head. Then I heard it, a sound like ice cracking beneath weight, though the surface was perfectly still. It wasn't close, yet it echoed across the lake with precision, as if someone, or something, was pacing underneath. I froze, and the others noticed. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting. We were not alone. We stepped closer to the lake, boots crunching in the snow. Each step sounded deafening in the oppressive silence. The depressions in the ice were larger than before, irregular and clawed at the edges, as if something had struggled to break through. My breath puffed in clouds, but it felt like even the air was resisting me. Maya bent down, shining her flashlight across the ice. "There's something beneath it," she whispered, voice barely audible. The beam caught faint movements under the black surface, ripples that didn't follow wind or snow patterns. Something was shifting, just under the ice. I grabbed my camera, trying to photograph it, but the flash made the lake react. A shockwave ran across the surface, concentric ripples emanating from a central point. My feet froze in place as something large stirred below, pressing against the thin ice. Then came a sound, deep and resonant, like bones cracking, spreading through the forest. It wasn't ice, it was alive. It was... Maya grabbed my arm, her hands shaking. "We need to go back," she said. But I couldn't move. My eyes were glued to the center of the lake, where the ripples were now forming a perfect circle, as if guiding us, beckoning us closer. A low moan rose from beneath the ice, vibrating through my teeth, through my chest. It wasn't wind, it wasn't trees. It was something massive, patiently pressing against the frozen surface. I noticed bubbles forming beneath the ice, each one moving like it had a direction, converging toward the center. Aaron whispered from behind, voice trembling. "It's waiting for us to step on it." I realized then that the depressions weren't just footprints. They were traps, marks left for anyone who came too close. The ice wasn't weak, it was a veil. Something below it knew we were here, and it was hungry. I stepped back instinctively, but the snow beneath my boots shifted unnaturally, as though the forest floor itself wanted to push me forward. The lake pulsed subtly, black waves rolling under the ice in impossible directions. I could see shapes now, elongated limbs, indistinct but humanoid, pressing against the ice from below, circling the center like predators surrounding prey. Maya screamed when one of the shapes rose near the edge, creating a bulge that rippled like water over stone. I grabbed her, yanking her back before the ice could respond. But the surface was too sensitive. Every move, every heartbeat, Every footstep sent vibrations that drew attention from whatever lurked below. Aaron suggested we retreat to the forest. But the moment we turned, the footprints in the snow behind us shifted on their own, leading directly back to the lake. They weren't ours. They belonged to whatever had been waiting, and they were inviting us back. I realized then that running wasn't an option. Not yet. The lake wanted us. We decided to split up, foolishly thinking more eyes meant more safety. I followed a narrow ridge along the lake, flashlight cutting through the snowstorm. The shapes beneath the ice moved with unnatural precision, almost coordinating, and the pulsing underfoot grew stronger. Then, from the center of the lake, a column of ice and black water erupted, splintering the surface like glass, sending shards flying. I barely dodged, my heart racing. A massive shadow twisted within the break, towering. But for a brief second, I saw its face. Hollow eyes, jagged teeth, mouth opening as if to swallow the world. I ran back toward where the others had gone, but the snow seemed to stretch endlessly, the lake expanding as if it were alive, breathing around me, drawing me closer to the center. Maya's voice echoed faintly, distant but panicked. "Jordan, it's not just beneath the ice, it's controlling it." And then I realized with icy clarity, the lake didn't just trap you. It decided who survived. I stumbled through the forest, snow up to my knees, trying to find Aaron and Maya. But the trees seemed to shift, elongating, bending the path like the lake itself was guiding us back toward its center. Every step sent a subtle vibration into the ice, and I could feel it watching, pulsing beneath the snow, patient and calculating. Ahead, I saw Maya crouched behind a fallen pine, whispering something I couldn't hear. Her breath came in ragged clouds, and her hands shook. When I reached her, she pointed toward the lake. The black surface was no longer still, it had risen slightly, forming ripples that mimicked human shapes, twisting and bending like reflections in a nightmare mirror. From beneath the ice, a deep, resonant hum began, vibrating through my chest. The shapes lifted, and I realized they weren't just beneath the ice. They were breaking the surface, reaching, testing, waiting for us to falter. I grabbed Maya's arm. There was only one choice: run or sink. We ran blindly, following a faint trail through the trees. But the lake seemed to expand, stretching unnaturally on both sides, swallowing the forest edge. Shadows moved atop the ice, elongated limbs, faceless heads, all pressing against the surface like a predator testing a cage. Aaron tripped and fell hard, snow spraying. The black ice behind him bulged violently, and for a second, I thought it would rise and swallow him entirely. I lunged, pulling him up, and we sprinted together. The hum from beneath the ice grew louder, becoming a chorus of whispers, crying, and mocking laughter, echoing through the trees. Each breath I took felt like inhaling water, cold and heavy, pulling me downward. Finally, we reached a narrow ridge far from the lake's edge. The shapes stopped advancing, but the ripples continued, and I knew it was waiting. Patient, endless, and we had survived. For now. I never returned to Hollow Pines. The lake remembers, and one day it will call again. We stopped at the top of the ridge, gasping for breath, hearts hammering, but the lake didn't retreat. It shimmered in the weak moonlight, black ice rippling with every heartbeat, as if alive and aware of our fear. I noticed the depressions, hundreds of them now, stretching toward the forest, like the lake had grown in the night. Maya whispered that she could see figures beneath the ice, faint outlines of people, or something that had been people, staring up at us. Their faces were frozen mid-scream, mouths open, eyes hollow. It was then that I realized the lake didn't just trap the living, it collected them, preserving fear itself in its frozen depths. The whispers returned, stronger, repeating a single terrifying phrase, "Come back," or "Join us." We didn't argue. We ran. Every step, the forest seemed to push us faster, the lake's pull receding but never letting go. I knew that whatever waited beneath that ice would remember us forever, waiting for the next foolish intruders. By dawn, we made it back to the road, snow matted to our clothing, lungs burning. The forest seemed normal again, almost forgiving. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the lake was watching us even now. Our cameras and recorders showed nothing but still snow, quiet ice, and shadows where none should exist. Yet every winter since, I have nightmares of the lake's surface bending, twisting, and faces pressing upward, mouths open in silent screams. I never return to Hollow Pines, but I warn anyone who listens, the frozen lake is patient. It waits beneath the ice, hiding in plain sight, tracking movements, recording fear, and collecting souls it finds unprepared. Some say the lake is cursed. Some say it's sentient. I only know it's hungry, and it will always remember those who trespass too close. I'll never forget the sound of the whispers, nor the weight of its gaze beneath the ice. My name is Ethan Cross, and this happened during the dead of winter, 2019, when I was working the night shift on the Oregon Rail line near Black Hollow. I was the assistant conductor, tasked with checking tracks and monitoring remote signals. The locals warned me about the hollow, claims of trains disappearing, ghostly whistles in the fog, and tracks that seemed to bend into nowhere. I thought it was superstition until that night. It started when the last scheduled train left the station, its lights vanishing into the snowstorm. Minutes later, a faint whistle echoed through the hollow, off schedule. My heart skipped. The signal lights flickered, red then green, then a strange pulse of purple that made my vision blur. I climbed down from the control tower to investigate. The tracks ahead were blanketed in snow, but I could see distorted footprints, too large and elongated, pressed into the white, leading toward the tree line. Something was waiting for the train, or for me. I walked carefully along the tracks, flashlight cutting through the storm. The whistle returned, low and mournful, vibrating through the frozen air. Every instinct screamed that this wasn't normal. Snow drifted unnaturally, forming arches over the rails, as if guiding me toward the hollow's center. Then I saw it. A faint glow ahead like train lights, but distorted, flickering in a way no real train should. As I approached, I noticed something horrifying. The tracks curved and twisted unnaturally, forming shapes I couldn't identify. My stomach churned. The path wasn't just warped, it was wrong, geometrically impossible, yet clearly navigable. Suddenly, a shadow moved along the rails, low and fast, yet humanoid in shape. It paused, turning toward me, and I could swear it had no face, just a smooth, reflective surface that mirrored my panic. I froze, flashlight trembling in my hand, realizing too late that the hollow wasn't just an empty stretch of forest. It was alive. I forced myself to move forward, each step crunching in the snow like a warning. The fog thickened, swirling around me, carrying a metallic scent that made my stomach turn. The tracks ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, yet when I looked behind, the station lights were gone, swallowed by the storm. Then the shadow moved again, faster this time, gliding along the rails with impossible speed. It was humanoid, yet the proportions were wrong. Limbs too long, torso twisted, head tilting unnaturally. My flashlight caught something horrifying. a glimmering mouth opening inside the faceless surface, sharp as a trap, but without sound. I stumbled backward, nearly falling onto the tracks. That's when I saw it. A train emerging from the fog, but unlike any locomotive I'd ever known. Its metal glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat, and the windows were black voids, swallowing light. The shadow darted ahead, merging seamlessly with the train. I realized with a cold chill, the Hollow had summoned it, and it was hungry for life. I backed away from the tracks, heart hammering, but the train accelerated unnaturally, defying physics, gliding silently despite the snow. The whistle shrieked, a high-pitched, almost screaming tone that rattled my bones. My breath came in ragged clouds as I realized the Hollow itself had bent the environment to its will. Aaron, my co-worker, appeared from behind the trees, shouting. He had taken a shortcut, but even his path was warped. The snow seemed to shift beneath him, guiding him like a predator leading prey. We met near a broken signal post, frozen in terror as the train stopped mid-track, perfectly aligned with the bend in the forest. The shadow detached from the train, standing tall on the rails, faceless, silent, pulsating as if it drew power from the icy night. It tilted its head toward us, waiting, testing, measuring. We didn't move. One wrong step, and the Hollow would decide we weren't leaving alive. We knew running wasn't an option. The forest seemed to bend and twist around us, guiding us back toward the train. My flashlight flickered, illuminating the shadow's faceless form. It didn't move, yet its presence filled the space, suffocating, like the night itself had taken shape. Aaron whispered, "It's testing us. It wants us to panic." But fear was already a living thing, crawling along my spine. The train's windows shimmered, revealing fleeting silhouettes of trapped passengers, their faces twisted in silent screams. They weren't alive, but they weren't entirely gone either. A low vibration ran through the rails, like the Hollow itself was breathing under the snow. The faceless figure lifted one arm, pointing toward the tracks ahead. Instinctively, we understood. We had to board the train if we wanted any chance of survival. Every step forward felt wrong, unnatural, as if the Hollow were warping the world beneath our feet. The wind howled, carrying the ghostly whistle closer, closer, until there was no choice but to move. We climbed aboard, hearts hammering, and the doors closed behind us without a sound, sealing us in darkness. The interior was wrong, longer than possible, shadows stretching along the walls. The train seemed alive, pulsing faintly, and the faint hum of whispers filled the car. I glanced at Aaron. He was pale, eyes wide, staring at the floor, where icy cracks spread like veins. Every footstep we took made the floor vibrate, as though responding to our fear. The passengers weren't there physically. They were trapped in a spectral limbo, faces pressed to walls, arms reaching, screaming silently. The shadow appeared inside the train as well, standing near the end of the car, faceless and tall, radiating an oppressive weight. Its presence demanded obedience, and we felt every instinct bending toward compliance. The train jerked forward, impossibly fast, gliding across tracks buried in endless snow. We weren't driving it. It was driving us straight into the Hollow. The train began to pick up speed unnaturally. Snow and fog outside swirling faster, bending in impossible patterns. The faceless shadow followed silently, its presence pressing into our minds, filling every thought with icy dread. The spectral passengers shifted, reaching, twisting, their silent screams reflecting our growing panic. I tried to locate the control panel, but it wasn't there. The train moved on its own, as if the hollow had become both engine and conductor. Aaron gripped my arm, muttering that we should try to escape, but the walls themselves seemed to stretch, elongating the passageways, preventing us from moving backward. From the windows, the forest blurred into a white-black void, trees bending unnaturally, following the train's path. Shadows flickered at impossible angles. Some pressed against the glass, their faceless forms staring directly at us. I realized then the hollow wasn't just a place. It was intentional, sentient, and alive, guiding us along a path that could end anywhere, and perhaps nowhere safe. The shadows suddenly moved toward the front of the car, and the temperature dropped drastically. My breath fogged, forming icicles in midair, and the whispers escalated into an almost melodic chant, echoing from every corner. The train jolted violently, as if crossing invisible gaps in the hollow itself. Aaron screamed when one of the spectral passengers lunged forward, passing through solid air to reach him. I grabbed his arm just in time, stumbling backward as the figure dissolved into mist. The faceless shadow watched silently, unblinking, waiting for any sign of weakness. Through the windows, the hollow appeared to fold in on itself. Rails bending into impossible loops, trees twisting toward the sky, snow forming patterns that pulled us forward. Every instinct screamed that we had entered a domain where the natural laws were irrelevant. And in that moment, I understood. The train wasn't just taking us through the hollow. It was showing us its true power, its control, and our inevitable surrender. The train slowed abruptly, coming to a halt on a stretch of track that seemed to float in nothingness, surrounded by fog so thick it swallowed all light. The faceless shadow stood at the far end, motionless. Yet every heartbeat felt as if it measured us, judged us. The spectral passengers gathered at the windows, pressing closer, their silent screams growing more desperate, as if warning us. Aaron and I backed away toward the rear car, only to find the doors had vanished, replaced by solid walls of icy black mist. Panic surged, but I forced myself to think. The train, the hollow, and the shadows were connected. It all responded to fear, hesitation, and defiance. I took a deep breath, gripping Aaron's arm. We had only one chance: move forward toward the shadow, confront it, and hope the hollow allowed escape. Every step was a struggle, as if the air itself resisted. Yet we advanced, knowing that hesitation would mean becoming another trapped face in the train. We reached the front of the train, where the faceless shadow radiated a palpable weight. The whispers intensified, echoing all around us, and the spectral passengers formed a semicircle, watching, waiting. I realized the train itself was the hollow's body. It was alive, aware, and deciding who survived. Then, in a sudden moment of clarity, I noticed a tiny break in the mist, a faint shimmer of normal tracks beyond. With Aaron, I lunged toward it, running across the icy, pulsing floor. The shadow raised an arm in silent warning, but it didn't stop us. We tumbled out onto solid ground as the train jolted violently, vanishing into the fog with a low, echoing whistle. Behind us, the tracks returned to normal, snow falling gently as if nothing had happened. We survived, but the memory lingers. The hollow is patient. The shadow waits. And the last train will come for anyone foolish enough to enter Black Hollow. My name is Lydia Harper, and this happened in the winter of 2020 when I was driving through Raven Creek, Oregon, on my way to visit family. A blizzard had rolled in faster than expected, reducing visibility to near zero. I spotted a dim light in the distance, a small old motel advertising vacancies. Desperate for shelter, I pulled in, unaware that I was driving straight into a nightmare. The motel looked deserted. Frost covering the windows, paint peeling from years of neglect. The neon sign flickered weakly, buzzing in the storm. I walked to the door and tried the handle. Locked. But inside, a faint voice whispered, "Check in. Stay. Forever." Hesitant, I circled the building, finally finding an entrance slightly ajar. The lobby was stale and cold, as if no one had breathed here in decades. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, and the furniture seemed oddly placed, too deliberate, like it had been arranged for some unseen purpose. Something in the air told me. This place wasn't just empty, it was waiting. I stepped inside, the door creaking behind me, muffling the howling wind. The reception desk was empty, but a bell sat atop it, polished and shiny as if recently used. I rang it, the sound echoing unnaturally through the empty lobby. A whisper followed, unintelligible but persistent, like someone, or something, was speaking directly into my mind. The rooms were lined along a narrow hallway, each door identical, the numbers fading. I tried one at random. The room was pristine, warm, almost inviting, a stark contrast to the frozen desolation outside. Yet the moment I stepped in, I felt it, an oppressive weight pressing down, as if invisible eyes were measuring my fear, my hesitation, my presence. Footsteps echoed in the hall, slow and deliberate. I wasn't alone. The snowstorm outside had trapped me here, and the motel itself seemed alive, aware, ready to choose its next victim. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but the lobby door had vanished behind me. I backed out of the room, heart pounding, and the hallway stretched impossibly longer than before. Each step echoed, not in sound, but in a vibration against my chest, as if the motel itself was alive. The doors lining the hall seemed to breathe, expanding slightly, closing slightly, as though inhaling and exhaling. A shadow moved at the far end of the corridor, slow, deliberate, yet its shape was human enough to unsettle me. It didn't walk. It glided, and with every movement the lights flickered, revealing glimpses of faces pressed against walls, mouths open, eyes wide with silent terror. I turned to run back to the lobby, only to find the stairs had vanished, replaced by a wall of ice-crusted wallpaper. My panic rose as whispers surrounded me, unintelligible but full of intent. Like the building itself was speaking, telling me I had no escape. Somewhere deep in the motel, the front desk bell rang by itself, sharp and commanding, as if the building had called me to the center of its horror. I forced myself to move toward the sound of the bell, each step heavier than the last, as if invisible hands tugged at my legs. The shadow followed silently, appearing in multiple corners at once, dissolving into darkness and reappearing closer. Every instinct screamed to run, but the hallway had no end, twisting unnaturally, loops folding upon themselves. The bell rang again, louder this time, and I saw the reception desk from a new angle. One that was impossible, as if the building had rotated around me. Behind the desk, a figure emerged, faceless and tall, with elongated limbs, reaching for me silently. The air was freezing now, icicles forming on the ceiling mid-motion, and the shadows of previous guests stretched across the floor, marching in silent, distorted lines. A door at the end of the lobby opened slowly, revealing a staircase leading downward. It was my only choice. I stepped toward it, knowing that whatever lay below would decide if I ever left this place alive. I descended the staircase slowly, every step creaking under my weight, though the silence suggested nothing should move. The stairs stretched further than possible, spiraling into darkness, each turn revealing more of the motel's unnatural design. The cold intensified, forming frost along my jacket, biting at my skin. At the bottom, the hallway opened into a massive room, impossibly large, with walls that shimmered as though liquid ice. Shadows shifted along the floor, moving independently of the dim light above. Faces appeared in the frost, screaming silently, watching my every movement. The air smelled faintly metallic, like blood mixed with frozen water. A faint light pulsed in the center of the room, drawing me like a moth to a flame. On a raised platform, I saw a figure seated, faceless, body elongated and twisted, as though carved from shadows themselves. The whispers grew louder, forming words in my mind. Stay. Forever. I knew then that the motel had no intention of letting anyone leave willingly. I tried to back away, but the floor beneath me seemed to ripple like water, guiding me forward toward the seated shadow. The whispers became a chorus, pressing into my mind, echoing my every fear, every doubt. My pulse pounded so loud, it seemed the motel could hear it. Suddenly, the shadow rose, limbs stretching impossibly, moving fluidly yet silently. Its presence pressed against me like a physical weight, making my chest tight, my legs heavy. Around it, the frozen faces on the walls twisted, mouths opening wider, silent screams that pierced through my thoughts. I stumbled, and a section of the floor gave way, revealing a black void below. Yet the shadow didn't reach for me. It waited, patiently, as if testing my resolve. I realized that fear was the key. The motel fed on hesitation. Summoning every ounce of courage, I ran past the figure, following a narrow corridor of light that had appeared on the far side of the room. This might be my only chance to escape. I sprinted down the narrow corridor of light, snow and frost still clinging to my coat, and the shadow followed at a distance, gliding silently. The walls on either side began to pulse and contract, narrowing the space, pressing in as if the motel itself was alive and trying to crush me. The whispers grew louder, echoing my every thought, repeating, "Stay. Stay forever." I reached a doorway leading to a stairwell, the only route upward. But the stairs were uneven, twisted like frozen branches, each step threatening to collapse. From behind, I heard a low rumble, the shadow moving impossibly fast, stretching across the corridor in impossible angles. Maya, another guest I hadn't noticed, appeared ahead, her eyes wide with terror. She grabbed my hand, urging me forward. Together, we climbed, every step feeling like walking on the edge of a collapsing world. The motel seemed to pulse beneath us, alive, hungry, and aware of every movement we made. Escape was possible, but only if we outran the building itself. We reached the top of the stairwell, emerging into a dimly lit hallway that seemed slightly more normal. Yet the air was oppressively cold, breath freezing midair, and the shadows of previous guests stretched across the floor toward us. Every door we passed whispered unintelligible words, and the walls groaned softly, bending subtly as if breathing. The shadow appeared again, this time at the far end of the hall, faceless and immense. Its presence radiated pure malice, pressing against our minds. I realized that the motel wasn't just a building. It was a predator, and we were prey. A faint exit sign flickered ahead, the only light in the oppressive darkness. We ran toward it, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the chilling pull of the shadow behind us. The doors slammed shut in succession, forcing us forward, guiding us like a river of ice and terror toward the one chance of escape. Every instinct told me the motel would not let us leave easily. We reached the exit hallway, the flickering sign glowing weakly. But the oppressive weight of the motel hadn't lifted. The shadow advanced silently, faceless, stretching impossibly, radiating pure hunger and malice. Every step toward freedom felt like moving through molasses, the air thick and cold, each breath a struggle. I grabbed Maya's hand, urging her forward, ignoring the whispers now screaming in my mind. You will stay. Forever. The walls pulsed rhythmically, almost alive, bending toward us, trying to trap us again. The frozen silhouettes of past guests lined the edges, silent watchers urging us to fail. Finally, we saw a faint outline of the snow-covered parking lot through the exit door. The shadow hesitated at the threshold, not leaving the hall, but watching, calculating, waiting for us to falter. We sprinted, feeling the pull of the motel's weight lessen with every desperate step. I dared a glance back. The shadow stood at the hall's end, unmoving, but we knew it would wait for the next lost soul foolish enough to enter. We burst through the front doors into the blizzard, snowflakes stinging our faces. The motel behind us seemed to pulse one last time before receding into silent darkness, as if it had been merely a shadow of itself, waiting for the next intruder. Our breaths came in ragged clouds, hearts hammering, but we were alive. The snowstorm swallowed the motel from view, leaving only footprints behind, ours fading quickly as if the building wanted no evidence we had ever escaped. We didn't stop running until the first hint of dawn broke over Raven Creek. Even now, when winter storms descend, I remember the whispers, the faceless shadow, and the frozen faces pressing from walls. The snowbound motel is patient, alive, and eternal. Anyone who enters its doors risks more than death. They risk becoming another shadow, trapped forever in the folds of its icy halls. I escaped, but the memory follows me every winter, a warning I cannot ignore. My name is Marcus Hale, and this happened in the winter of 2018. I was traveling alone through the remote mountains of Oregon for a solo winter hiking trip when the storm hit. The snow came down so fast, I couldn't see the path ahead, and my GPS had died hours earlier. I stumbled upon a small, isolated cabin perched on a ridge, its chimney smoke curling faintly into the storm. Relief flooded me. I didn't know then that stepping inside would be the start of something far darker than any storm. The cabin looked abandoned but lived in, with a fire pit in the center of the main room, ashes cold but recently disturbed. I called out, no answer. But the air was unnaturally still, almost watching me. Every sound outside was muffled by the snow, yet inside, I could hear faint creaks, whispers in the corners, and the soft scrape of something moving just out of sight. A sense of wrongness crept over me. This cabin wasn't simply empty. It was alive with something patient, hungry, and waiting. I stepped inside cautiously, shutting the door against the storm. The cabin was small but cozy, though every object felt purposefully placed, like someone or something had arranged it to observe me. The wooden floorboards creaked unnaturally with each step, echoing far louder than they should have in such a small space. I noticed scratches along the walls, too deep for mere wear, symbols, perhaps, or warnings. The whispers grew louder, unintelligible, pressing against my mind as if reminding me that I was not alone. I tried to ignore it, thinking it was just my imagination. But the shadows in the corners moved independently, sliding along the floor and walls without light or source. A low, rhythmic tapping began from the loft above. Each tap resonated through the cabin, echoing in my chest. My pulse quickened. Something was waiting upstairs. Something had been here long before me, and now it knew I was here. I climbed the narrow stairs to the loft, each step creaking and groaning beneath my weight. The storm outside rattled the windows, but inside, the cabin was deathly still, save for the low rhythmic tapping that seemed to come from every direction at once. My flashlight cut through the shadows, revealing old furniture stacked unnaturally, as if moved to block or trap someone or something. Then I saw it. A small, frost-covered figure crouched in the far corner of the loft. At first, I thought it was a doll, but it moved slightly, head tilting unnaturally, limbs too long and thin for a child. Its eyes, dark voids, locked on mine, and a whisper slithered through my mind. "You shouldn't be here." I froze, flashlight trembling. Every instinct screamed to run. But the loft stairs behind me had vanished, replaced by a solid wall. The cabin wasn't just alive. It shifted to trap intruders, reshaping itself around the storm and my fear. The figure slowly rose, stretching unnaturally, making no sound. Yet the room seemed to echo with 1,000 silent screams. Its limbs bent at impossible angles, and frost fell from its body as though it had been frozen for decades. I realized it wasn't alive in the traditional sense, but a manifestation of the cabin itself, a guardian or a predator. I backed away, desperate to find a path down, but the walls of the loft seemed to pulse, narrowing the space with every movement. The whispering escalated into a chorus, overlapping and twisting, each voice demanding I stay. Then I noticed something horrifying. The cabin floor below the loft had begun to shimmer, revealing distorted reflections of myself and the figure. Faces twisted in terror, shadows clawing at the light. Every reflection was a possible future, a warning or a trap. I had to escape before the cabin reshaped entirely and consumed me as it had countless others. I scrambled across the loft, flashlight shaking, the frost-covered figure gliding silently behind me. Every breath I took fogged instantly, freezing midair, as if the cabin wanted to trap me in the cold forever. I searched desperately for any sign of the stairs, any path downward, but the walls and floor shifted like ice, warping and bending impossibly with each movement. Then I noticed a faint glow from a corner near the loft railing. A trapdoor, partially hidden beneath a thin layer of frost, pulsed with a soft amber light. It was my only chance. I hesitated, feeling the weight of the cabin pressing on me, but the figure loomed closer, faceless eyes fixed on me. Summoning every ounce of courage, I threw open the trap door and descended into darkness. The air below smelled of damp earth and frozen decay, and I knew that the cabin's heart, the source of its malevolence, awaited me. I landed softly onto a stone floor, shivering violently, and the whispers followed, twisting through the air like smoke. The basement was massive, far larger than the cabin above suggested, filled with rows of frozen mannequins. Or maybe people, their eyes frozen wide in silent screams. Frost clung to everything, coating faces, limbs, and the walls themselves, giving the impression of a perpetual winter graveyard. The faceless figure appeared at the entrance to the basement. But this time it seemed to merge with the shadows, stretching along the walls and floor like living ice. The whispers intensified, repeating my name, urging me to stay, promising safety if I yielded. I noticed a faint light on the far side of the basement, an old wooden door, partially ajar, with a thin line of snow-dusted daylight peeking through. I knew that beyond that door lay my only chance for survival, but the cabin wouldn't give me the path easily. Every step toward it was a struggle against the building itself, alive and vengeful. I crept toward the faint light of the wooden door, every step crunching against frost-covered debris on the basement floor. The faceless figure followed silently, but its presence pressed into my mind, filling me with a cold, suffocating dread. Shadows shifted along the walls, some moving independently, others stretching unnaturally toward me. The mannequins, or whatever they had once been, seemed to twist their heads, watching me, urging me to hesitate, to falter. My legs burned from cold and fear, but I forced myself onward, every breath forming icy clouds that drifted into the darkness. Finally, I reached the door. It was heavier than it should have been, the wood warped as if resisting my touch. Behind it, the snowstorm outside beckoned, a promise of freedom. I pulled with all my strength, the cabin groaning around me as if trying to swallow me back into its frozen heart. The door slowly gave way, revealing a narrow path through the blizzard toward safety. But the figure lingered, waiting, patient and eternal. I stumbled through the doorway into the blizzard, the wind slicing at my face like knives. Snow whipped around me, visibility near zero, but freedom never felt so real. Behind me, the cabin loomed, dark and silent, the whispers fading, though I could feel its presence watching, waiting for the next traveler. I glanced back once, and through the swirling snow, I thought I saw the faceless figure standing in the doorway. Taller and more imposing than memory allowed, unmoving but alive with intent. My chest tightened. The building itself was patient, eternal, a predator that would wait for anyone foolish enough to enter. I ran down the ridge toward the forest road, the cold wind biting, snow sinking beneath my feet. The cabin faded from view, almost as if it had never been there, leaving only the memory of icy whispers, frozen eyes, and a faceless guardian etched into my mind forever. I survived, but I will never forget Widow's Peak. I plunged into the forest, snow up to my knees, branches scratching my face and clothes, but I didn't dare stop. The memory of the faceless figure in the frozen basement echoed in my mind, a constant warning that the cabin never truly let anyone leave. The storm seemed endless, each step forward a battle against the wind. Yet the narrow path I saw through the snow was my only hope. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of shadows moving between the trees, shapes too dark and sharp to be natural, always just at the edge of my vision. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every instinct told me that hesitation would allow the cabin to reclaim me, fold me back into its frozen halls, leaving only a shadow behind. Hours passed like minutes, and eventually, I saw the faint glow of a highway below, lights of distant vehicles piercing the blizzard. I had survived the climb, but the image of the faceless figure in the cabin would haunt me forever. I reached the highway and collapsed, shivering uncontrollably, the roar of passing cars almost surreal after the cabin's oppressive silence. The storm was beginning to ease, but the memory of the frozen cabin lingered like a burning imprint in my mind. Every winter since, whenever snow blankets the peaks of Widow's Peak, I recall the whispers, the faceless figure, and the frozen eyes watching me. The cabin is patient, eternal, and it waits. It doesn't chase, it lures, tests, and traps those foolish enough to enter. I survived by chance, by will. But countless others have vanished into its icy halls, their screams preserved in the frost, the shadows, and the stillness that follows the storm. Even now, I know it is watching, waiting for the next wanderer to step into its grip. Because the frozen cabin of Widow's Peak is never empty, never still, and never forgiving. As the storm settles and the snow drifts quiet across the forests, mountains, and towns of Oregon, we leave behind the 7 most disturbing winter horrors you've ever heard. From the frozen shadows of Widow's Peak to the haunted depths of the snowbound motel, from faceless figures stalking icy trails to spectral trains in Black Hollow. Each story reveals a truth we cannot ignore. The cold hides more than just snow. It hides fear, malice, and ancient patience. These are not legends or bedtime tales. They are real, documented encounters from ordinary people who walked unknowingly into the icy grip of places that thrive on terror. Each winter, each storm, brings a new risk, a reminder that the darkness is patient, silent, and always waiting. If you felt a chill creep up your spine tonight, you're not alone. The memories of these horrors linger because fear itself is eternal. And in the shadows of Oregon's frozen wilderness, it never sleeps. Thanks for watching. This was Dark Fears.